And we're back. Wow.
Once again.
Quite the hiatus there.
Yeah, no. Terrible.
Dude, have you heard about you've heard about the Menendez brothers trying to get out of prison, right?
I haven't watched that the updates on it, but I'm aware of it.
Yeah. And then there was some drama on Netflix that a lot of people watched too.
That's the one I'm referring to. Yeah.
Well, right. But they I think that came. It's funny because I love how Netflix becomes like a social justice, or not really a social justice, but like a platform for like, I guess, getting the wheels in motion for like appeals. And,
yeah.
You know, like I love that Stephen Avery thing.
This I'm innocent. I got wrongly convicted.
Right. What was that? How to Make a Murderer?
Yeah.
Did you see the like counter documentary about that? Like that Candace Owen put together. I was like,
down a lot of.
Bro, I have never felt so betrayed. You know what I mean?
Got y'all emotionally invested, feeling bad for him.
Right. And just the facts that came out in that. And then sometimes I'm like, okay, well, is something now being hidden from me? It makes me like question everything. You know what I mean? Because I watched that How to Make a Murderer, and I was like, that dude's innocent. You know what I mean? And for sure the kid, that Brendan Dassey or whatever, I was like, oh yeah, he's innocent, dude. You know. But it's just crazy how they do that to you. Like, have you ever watched The Staircase on Netflix? Oh, dude. You have got to watch The Staircase. Yeah, I'm not kidding. Like, you would love it. Okay, just watch it. Okay, watch it with the missus. Series? Yeah, it is a series. It's not a drama. It's legit. It's about a guy. I can't remember his name off the top of my head. It'll come to me. But he's accused of murdering his wife. And then there's a show on HBO Max. Don't watch that. That's a drama. But The Staircase, it's on Netflix, and you can watch. It's just it's a real life action footage that the guy filmed, all about the case, dude. You will vacillate between, oh, he's guilty, no way. It's like crazy, and then the next episode you're like, I don't know, might be some wiggle room here. And you'd be like, no, he's guilty. He's like, oh my God, he's innocent. It's just crazy the directions they take you, right? But
Staircase.
Yeah, Staircase. Watch it. And
Word.
Not the next time we see each other, but the time after that. Yeah. Give me a report back. Yeah. So it got me thinking about the Menendez brothers came up, and I was looking into that, kind of researching this, because I was thinking about an aspect that a lot of people didn't know about that came up in the trial. And it had to do with confidentiality and the therapist that was working with them, because in that show on Netflix, they had talked a lot about the allegations of sexual abuse from their dad, right? That came up quite a bit as a mitigating factor as to why they committed the crime. And then I was looking at like confidentiality and informed consent, and then there was a case with this. I'll be sure to pronounce this guy's name fully. Robert Arthur Selby Lowe from Australia.
Rob Lowe. Not
Rob Lowe, the angelic actor, super good looking dude. But so I pulled up this, I kind of wrote, I say, so basically this case, this is a long time ago, by the way, though. I mean, well, not crazy long ago. It was early 1990s, 1991. So he was in treatment because he was convicted for a sex offense, right? And he had a therapist, and this kind of started a lot of questions, at least in Australia, about a therapist like duty to warn and then therapeutic confidentiality. Because what happened was he's in sex offender treatment, but he had disclosed fantasies, and pretty vivid fantasies, about and urges about abducting and harming a child, right? Like sexually abusing a child. So his therapist never got to the point where she felt, oh, I need to report this to somebody, right? But it was so specific that she thought, oh, this has to be a real person that he's talking about, right? Which is, I mean, we could talk about the utility of talking about fantasies in sessions or anyway.
I was just predicting where this is going.
Well, right.
Yeah.
So she didn't report those statements, and then later he abducted and murdered a 6-year-old girl. Her name was Sherry Beasley. So this was obviously tons of controversy because a lot of people were saying the therapist in this case should have breached confidentiality, but that kind of calls into question. I mean, when they're expressing fantasy so and he did express intention, but he never like identified.
Did it give details on? Because like that's the line between reportable, like mandatory reporting versus just normal client confidentiality, like that. There must have been. Was there like a pretty clear, like, oh yeah, that should have been reported?
So
like, I'm going to sexually, there's my neighbor. I don't like.
Yeah. So no. So there was that's the part where it becomes kind of murky, right? So like in a lot of cases, so in general, and of course, states are all a little bit different. So I mean, wherever you live, look it up, right? But the general idea is that therapists are legally obligated to maintain confidentiality unless there's an imminent risk of harm to an identifiable individual. So an imminent risk meaning, and again, imminent that's a weird definition right there. We all kind of know what that means, but then legally it's like, what does that really mean? You know what I mean? And then to harm an identifiable individual. So in like a lot of cases, I think about that, and it doesn't even talk about like committing crimes. Like our clients is a little bit different because there's not the normal like therapist-client relationship. I mean, they sign away a lot of that as part of them being in our treatment, and they're under the supervision of, adult probation and parole and whatnot. But if I was just dealing with an outpatient client on the streets, and now I'm legally obligated to maintain confidentiality, and that client says, hey, Jeff, I just wanted you to know I might miss therapy next week because I'm going to go down the street and I'm going to rob the credit union. But don't worry, because I'm not going to bring a weapon in there. I'm not harming. I'm just going to like pass a note over and say I've got a bomb strapped to my chest, and so if you don't give me the money, and then I'll just get whatever's in the drawer. But I need to lay low for a week, so I won't be in there next week. I mean, can you report that?
I say split that bag, and I won't say anything.
I mean, it's weird, right?
Yeah,
like,
it is.
They've explicitly said, I'm not going to harm anybody.
I don't think you can report it.
And there's not an identifiable individual. You know what I mean?
I don't think you can report it.
I know, weird, right? It's kind of a weird spot to be in, but it was enough. The therapist said that his descriptions were like this girl, it wasn't just like a one-off. It wasn't like he just saw her. It was like, oh, here I go. He had obviously watched her and multiple times like stalked her, and then had fantasies about doing whatever he did to her, right? And then he was talking about that in therapy. So it was like, well, should you have said something? I mean, the level of detail that brought into that fantasy, should you have said something? You know what I mean? And I don't think it really. I don't know. It's so tough. You know what I mean?
It's very tough. I think that if a client presented me with something like that and was, talking about some pretty explicit sexual behaviors, I think I would spend a lot of time discussing intent and, like trying to figure out, like, is this a plan or is this a fantasy?
Yeah.
And that, I don't know that there's any clear, there's like going to be like obvious indicators, but I would think most clients would be a little too savvy to just give you like on a platter this.
Well, and also here's the other thing is, and do we have an ethical, if not a legal obligation to inform them in a way that they can tell us those things without getting themselves in trouble, right? Because here was, and you're very familiar with the Von Baron case. 2016 is a federal case, and that was in the 10th Circuit Court of Appeals. And basically, some of you might know if you're listening, and any of our clients who listen to this, like polygraph testing is typically a condition for our clients, right? And they, in that case, they said that if you we do one called a sexual history polygraph, right? And if you admit to undetected victims or unknown victims, those cannot be used to file new charges against you. Like you can't do this in a way that a client is going to report, and then enough information that it has to be reported, and then as a duty to warn, and then file new charges, because that's a violation of the Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination. The court said you cannot do that.
Right.
Even if, and I was reading more into that case. You know what's funny about that is even if you are providing them with an explanation for everything, if they feel coerced, in other words, if they feel I will get in trouble if I don't do this, any threat of anything, like any punishment coming from that, can be used as, oh, you violated his Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination. And that was doubled down in a new case, United States versus Gaskin from 2024, and exactly the same thing is
meaning that, well, if it's like, okay, a condition of your treatment in order to advance to X level, in order to be able to go through the reunification process, you need to complete this polygraph. And the client says, I don't feel comfortable doing that. It's like, well, that's what you need to do to get through the program. You're saying that just something like that can then be looked at as violating their Fifth Amendment rights,
right? Or if they fail and sometimes we don't have control over it, like they fail and maybe a parole officer or somebody else like violates them and revokes their parole or their probation as a result of that. That could be looked at as coercion. So getting back to the Rob Lowe thing was Robert Lowe, not Rob Lowe. So basically what came from that says, if a therapist encourages or pressures a client to disclose past undetected crimes without clear informed consent, they could face legal and ethical liability.
Okay. Good there.
And the therapists have to clarify whether disclosure of past crimes could lead to legal consequences. Real simple. Failure to properly warn clients could result in legal challenges. And then if disclosure is used for prosecution, then that could be a problem there. But so the question is let's say you're in a session with Robert Lowe, and he's disclosing those things, fantasies and whatnot, right? And they're super vivid and very detailed, and you start to have suspicions that this is about a real person. Do you have an obligation then to say, hey, buddy, before you go any further, I need to remind you that if you start to give me an indication that this is a real person and I'm able to identify them, I have to report this to the police.
I've done that.
Right. Like, that's what people don't understand, because if you don't do that, and there's several resources on this. So the APA, American Psychological Association, National Association of Social Workers,
NASA.
Yeah, NASA. Yeah, NASA. The IRA. Yeah, but ATSA does as well. They recommend these things, like remind clients regularly. Think about this. So ethical guidelines emphasize that one-time consent is insufficient. So think how many times a client comes in and we give them an orientation packet, and even though we explain that to them in really simple terms and they sign it, and we have pretty good confidence they understand that, not good enough. You have to remind clients regularly about mandatory reporting laws before sensitive discussions. Pause and clarify confidentiality limits before a client makes a self-disclosure.
Good. Document
discussions about confidentiality, polygraph testing, self-incrimination risk. So, man, doesn't that... people listen to this are like, what? Like, you know what I mean? Like,
oh yeah.
You are allowing them to get away with something that could have otherwise saved somebody, right?
Right.
So what do you say to that? Jeff Moore?
Well, yeah. I mean, my duty is to my client. That's they are my my client's my client. As I think some therapists believe like and they make an argument for community safety.
Sure.
And I guess the argument I would make is, in order for me to adequately treat this client and to help them, I need to have a full understanding of, I'll use your term, the constellation of events that went into their
patent pending.
Yeah. Before, during, and after. I need to know everything, but I don't need to know the names of the victims in order to do my job in helping them adjust their treatment and address risk. And that I would say that, like, by hunting down, identifying information of victims or prospective victims, that then I'm then blurring my role into investigator, which compromises my ability to be a therapist.
I agree. And I'd say if you're not comfortable with that, then don't work with this population, right?
Yeah.
And unfortunately, for people who are like, well, that's crazy, I'd just say, well, our objective is to reduce the likelihood of something like that happening, right? Like I would also get to the point where, I mean, just explaining those fantasies in graphic detail, I would wonder what would be, I don't know the point behind that, to be totally honest. I think it'd be much more effective use of our time to say, well, what are some strategies you're doing to interfere with those fantasies? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, are you having fantasies that are deviant? That's all I need to know. I don't need to know the content. I'm going to define deviancy for him, and then I'm going to ask, well, what are the strategies that you're using to interfere with that? Because why would I need to know the details of your deviant fantasy to assist you?
You just made me realize I kind of do that. I'll say, okay, is whatever it is that you're thinking about in your head, is it something that if you actualized it would hurt somebody or get you into trouble?
Yeah.
And that's sort of where I leave.
And that really, other than that, why do you need to know?
I don't.
Why do you need to know the graphic details? It just seems, once again, it seems voyeuristic as therapists. Like, why do you need to know that? You know what I mean?
Sometimes clients are exhibitionistic.
Oh, totally. Like that would be my worry, is that he's kind of getting excited by talking about it. Now he's not just thinking it; he's articulating it to another person.
His mind. He's becoming like this thing. He's
and then and then what's she saying? And then what'd you do? You know what I mean? Like, anyway, but there are real world implications though, because in the Menendez case, there was a doctor. It's Dr. Jerome Oziel. I can't remember. So he's a clinical psychologist, and he played a pretty big role in their legal proceedings because he started treating them in like 1988 after their parents had sought therapy for them following like a series of burglaries. And during the sessions, Eric confessed to the murders of his parents to Dr. Oziel, and he recorded those confessions without the brother's explicit consent, because he just recorded his sessions for dictation. And then he later shared those tapes. This is so crazy. He shared those tapes with his mistress, Judalyn Smith. And then after their relationship ended, she went and reported that to the police, and it led to leading to their arrest, right? And the admissibility of the tape confessions, that was a huge focal point in the trial. And then the defense argued that the recordings were protected under doctor-patient confidentiality, but the court ruled that the tapes were admissible because he had a duty to warn, because of it overruled his confidentiality. But in the end, he was accused of manipulating patients, obviously an unethical relationship. So he lost his psychology license in 1997. And then he had to move. He couldn't practice psychology anymore after that. Right. That's what I'm saying. So it's like, take this seriously. And if you're going to, the Menendez brothers weren't murderers when he started working with them, but I'd say, you clearly have obligations to this. And if you're just uncomfortable with those prospects working with this client population, then don't work with them. You know what I mean? Pretty just that simple.
And so the take-home lesson I'm getting from you also is for clinicians to, during whatever regular intervals would be, I think, to just making a point of continually reinforcing reporting requirements and everything that we just talked about, and then documenting in your notes that you had that conversation with the client.
Yeah, that too. And I would even say, like, if you get to the point where you feel like a client is even like getting close to it, like pump the brakes and double down and say, oh, hey, by the way, you know what I mean?
Oh yeah.
Like that's something we probably.
I'm sure you've done that. I have.
Oh yeah, I have a bunch of times.
Yeah.
So, okay. Well, I think that's all we have to say on
Good
this one.
topic,
Huh?
dude.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.